For the month of December, get 25% off your first month or your first year of a membership to the Second Wind Patreon. Supporting independent games media means you get more biting games criticism like this.
Man, great big airway obstructing bollocks to the Game Awards. Claire Obscure Game of the Year, fair enough, but Best Indie and Best Debut Indie? A, it was made by ex-Ubisoft lads, so if that counts as a newcomer, so does putting on a false moustache and running to the back of the line for another free sample at the Whole Foods. And B, a game made by one dude in a shed out of leftover pixels and crisp packets, that is an indie game. A game that commissioned all its character avatars from someone on DeviantArt who earns the bulk of their living drawing Snagglepuss fisting Winnie the Pooh. That is an indie game. The Game Awards badly need to acknowledge the middle ground between that and AAA. I know, I grew up in the Midlands, and I'm sick of explaining to people from London that there's actually a lot of England you have to get through before you're up north. We don't all eat black puddings or act in high fantasy HBO dramas. It's galling because this was such a great year for indies. I could have filled a top 10, easy. Not that AAA didn't make significant contributions, and incidentally I could have probably done a top 10 Blandest as well. Rest assured, my 2025 Best, Worst and Blandest Awards is a complete Claire Obscure free zone. That'll pay those fuckers back for 1066. Fifth best. A brief word on what didn't make the cut. Citizen Sleeper 2, good game. Dispatch, good game, nice tits, but I reluctantly nudged them out of the top 5, because it's mainly narrative that makes those games, and it's still the intersection between narrative and gameplay that I find the most interesting. D&D dice rolls and dialogue trees with all the impact of a sapling on a train track don't cut it. Therefore, my 5th best is Promise Mascot Agency. Not quite as good writing, but it let me ramp a tiny Japanese truck off a cliff while firing a squealing pink blob out of a cannon at a billboard I disagree with, and that counts for a lot. 5th Blandest. I've noticed that it's not uncommon for the very last game I review in a year to end up somewhere in my lists, which is probably down to it still being fresh in memory, so bearing in mind that it's about as fully recallable as any game could possibly be at this point, I will now list the parts of Metroid Prime 4 that I found interesting. Oh, Samus does the Akira slide on her motorbike at one point. Boy, Akira's a good film, isn't it? I wish I'd spent a certain portion of this month watching that. 5th worst. I felt slightly bad about kicking more shit out of Tales of the Shit Aid the Lord of the Rings pile of shit, because it was a lot more wholesome than most of what I deal with, but then I realised, wait a second, that's how they get you. This is kin to the innocent batting of the eyes my kids put on before admitting where precisely they have been putting peanut butter that does not conventionally have any business with peanut butter. Cozy does not mean low effort, and Tales of the Shire is just that, a low effort cynical IP exploiting exercise whose title needed to pick a fucking article and stick with it. 4th best. I'm giving it to the Rogue Prince of Persia because, considered apart from the attached IP, it's a rather lovely conjunction of tight combat and traversal gameplay loops with some fun story elements that pay off the roguelike format, and I only wish it had had a little more depth in the late game. Meanwhile, considered as not apart from the attached IP, it's just rather pleasing to see another nice thing come from a long-tortured name. Quite inspiring, actually, like when someone makes a beautiful piece of art out of a big pile of discarded garbage. 4th Blandest. It's a shame that after Doom 2016 reinvented the franchise with its no-nonsense approach to demonic anatomy lessons, the sequels seem to have gone, but on the other hand, how about yes-nonsense? And so Doom the Dark Ages brought us more of the same combat but constantly interrupted with insipid vehicle sections and cutscenes from a story that reads like an extremely socially unaware person at a party excitedly telling you about their Warhammer campaign as they fail to interpret the meaning of your persistent attempts to move past them to the bathroom door. 4th worst. You might say it's a little unfair to stick Split Fiction in the worst list. The gameplay and visuals are good, and the work of no doubt many talented individuals, that it would be cruel of me to tar just because every word that comes out of the protagonist's mouths makes me want to shove them eyeball first onto both ends of a railroad spike and push them into a giant vat of printed out negative Goodreads reviews. The writing is so painful it eclipses any of the game's good qualities for me, and trying to focus on them can't help but bring to mind the classic phrase, "But apart from that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play?" There's nothing quite like a good newspaper puzzle page to act as the first bulwark against my inevitable future dementia, and I've never played a game that embodied the spirit of the newspaper puzzle page better than Blueprints, the first-person exploration-based roguelite puzzler that is somehow simultaneously the logic puzzle, the Sudoku, and the cryptic crossword. And it all spirals together to craft this wonderfully immersive world that comes to life before your eyes as you place doorways and select blueprints for... Oh shit, I just got that. 3rd Blandest. You might expect that the game that literally put me to sleep would rank higher in the Bland 5, but as I've said before, 3rd Blandest is the true prize in the mediocrity stakes, and for all that Little Nightmares is a tedious slog through old ideas with an obnoxious unwanted co-op focus that you can observe aging in real time with its frequent unreasonable deaths sucking all tension out of what atmosphere it manages to create, it does have the saving grace of not being very long, and at least I came out of it thoroughly well rested. 3rd worst. If Rogue POP is a beautiful piece of art coming out of a big pile of garbage, the long-awaited Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 demonstrates that process running in precisely the opposite direction. Bloodlines 1 was a game that had plenty of flaws but had a definite spark, one that raised the question, could this be a seed that with nurturing could sprout into something truly great? Then many years later, Bloodlines 2 came along and said, bugger if we know, want to do some shitty combat? Not really. Well, how about flinging yourself off a tall building? Ooh, you read my mind, Bloodlines 2. Second best. There's 3 roguelikes in my top 5 this year, but you shouldn't read too much into that. I always think roguelike is more of a medium than a genre at this point. But looking at Rogue POP and Blueprint, it's particularly the ways roguelikes have explored storytelling lately that have been giving them the boost, and Hades has always shown how that's done. Yes, I called Hades 2 a bit of a the same but more of its sequel, but I can't deny how much of my spare time I've spent on it this year. I've even been replaying Hades 1 because of it, and I'm sincerely missing the ability to take baths with people. In both the game and reality, actually. Second Blandest. A day may yet come when my Bland 5 list does not feature a Ubisoft open world game, and should it come, I will not celebrate, because that would mean the industry somehow managed to cough up 5 games that were blander than a Ubisoft open world. Perhaps we should thank Ubisoft for continuing to gatekeep mediocrity, Assassin's Creed Shadows being yet another overproduced overlarge busywork game with a plot focus grouped to oblivion, fit only to be ground up and recycled as packing material for other better games. Then again, perhaps not, because it's a big pile of monkey spunk. Second worst. For a scary moment there, I thought condemning the Call of Duty franchise was getting old, that there was nothing more to be said, but I gotta hand it to them, Black Ops 7 exceeded all my expectations for discovering new depths of terribleness. With a campaign equal parts dull and bathroom carpet chewingly insane that seemed to be actively hostile to its audience, the only positive I have is that at least Call of Duty seems to be less racist these days. Now it's just completely soulless. Maybe they needed the racism to fire the creative spark, like with Kurt Cobain and heroin. Best game. Yeah, I know, slight hypocrisy to talk shit about the Game Awards pushing a AA game like Clair Obscur over genuine indie games and then turn around and put another AA game, The Alters, in my top spot, but I'd argue The Alters embodies the spirit of the underdog, in that you play as an underdog, and 5 clones of said underdog. Yes, the AI controversy was a hiccup, but I don't want to let that overshadow what I found to be a singularly well-designed game on its narrative level, gameplay level, and every level in between. Plus, the main actor had to put on like 9 different silly voices, and as someone who records audiobooks, I wanted to express silly voice solidarity. Blandest game. Oh boy, I've been dreading having to write this one up. It's Borderlands 4, okay? Another grindathon in the sense of both the core gameplay loop and what the dialogue causes me to do to my teeth from the House of Pitchford. A game so mind-numbingly one-note and poorly optimised that I struggle even to think of interesting ways to complain about it. Have you noticed that it's very nearly an anagram of bored slander, which is precisely what I'm currently doing to it? An uncontroversial choice, but come on. I don't see how anyone could possibly argue that anything is worse than Mind's Eye without venturing into comparisons to chemical weapon usage against civilian targets. In case it needs restating, it's a dull shootout across an utterly lifeless open world threaded by a story demonstrating schizophrenia beyond the reach of psychopharmacology. And it really illustrates that the people controlling where all the money goes in the high-level games industry don't have the first clue what they're fucking doing. And perhaps better results could be gleaned from replacing them with literally anyone else. Or perhaps a room full of gently sedated possums. Well, another year gone. And before you think about skipping over this list of Patreon names, let's not lose sight of the fact that these wonderful people are the reason Second Wind continues to exist. And if you want our content to continue and would like to see your name on this Hall of Heroes and gain access to all kinds of secret bonus videos as well, toddle along to patreon.com/secondwindgroup and sign up to give us as little as $1 a month to keep us going. Anyway, see you in the new year. Stick around for the honourable mentions. You might want to have a finger ready on the pause button.